is a green vehicle, etc., and how can we help with that sort of, the obvious answer to the layman is, well, if it's a hybrid, it's more green than others, and that's obviously not the case, as we all know. How things change over time is for us to help work with our supply chain and make sure the message that we give to our clients is one that we are working with our supply chain to, as things develop over the next 5, 10, 15 years, to make sure that we are at least working with the supply chain to give a genuine, true picture of what vehicles are available and when and how often, and work with our suppliers to make sure that we're not just it's not just smoke and mirrors, as it were. That's from our perspective, because we're definitely getting the sort of request to have them as an option. But obviously there's other challenges as to how long that's going to take before there's more and more of those vehicles come on stream, if at all, and the reasons behind that. But we don't want to be seen as not giving our clients that choice, but also understanding the challenges that the industry's got with, infrastructure problems and so on and so on and so on. So trying to stay as close to it as we can and be at the forefront of it, and having these kind of sessions is what we're trying to do, and make sure our account managers and suppliers know that we're in that position, that we're not trying to force one thing one way or another. We're working with the suppliers to make sure that we give everybody the best options, but they are true, not sort of made up.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that, Peter. And I want to ask the same question to Keith Keane, which is, with clean air zones being introduced, what effect will this have on the private hire industry? Keith Keane from Keane Group.
Thanks, James. I can only look at it from our fleet's side of thing, and I think with green transportation and being compliant for the clean air zone can be quite easily two very different things. Our fleet, for example, 76% of them are hybrid, but of that 76%, only 5% of those are plug-in hybrid. So we don't have any full electric vehicles whatsoever. So to meet the new zone requirements that really kick into the expansion of the South and North Circular on the 25th of October, all of our vehicles would meet the Euro 4, Euro 6 requirement. But like I say, we don't have any full electric. The standard of vehicle, since licensing came about, has really improved as well. So from a private hire sector, the vehicles I think would largely be compliant. I've not had many operators complain about the expansion of the zone. It's the congestion zone that's the hot topic. It's not ULEZ. So from a clean air point of view, I don't think it's going to have a huge negative impact on our industry.
Okay. Thank you for that, Keith. I appreciate it. So I think some good feedback there. So I'm going to move on to the second question, and this will go to Alex first, which is, with the decline in transport requirements over the past year, what additional challenges lie ahead for becoming a carbon-free industry? And Alex, can you answer that first, please?
Yeah, hi, James. Yeah, sure. I think obviously there has been, although it's been a fair peaks and troughs, COVID has reduced clearly transport across the road. We can see a reduction in usage across the Genie Point network, for example, which has been fairly dramatic, but dramatic in both peaks and troughs. So when we pull out of lockdowns, there's an exponential increase, which is a record-breaking increase, only 2 or 3 weeks after a lockdown period. So, and these are an increase of somewhere between 60 and 70% over the same time last year. So that in itself shows you there's a tremendous robustness in the EV and the transition to a greener e-mobility future. So very interesting dynamics, and actually almost too good to be true in many respects. The other, that's just a fact really of where we are. I think one of the key bottlenecks, everybody talks about transition and carrot and stick legislation through government or local government. One of the key problems that remain is the vehicle manufacturing bottleneck, and indeed the supply chain which supplies that, and have given these manufacturers the confidence and the transition going forwards. Now that has definitely turned a corner over the last couple of years, but there remains a big supply issue in the build chain, be it UK, Europe, or any other place that creates and manufactures these vehicles. So I think everything's going very much in the right direction, but we do need to help and advise on how we can support the supply chain, which is definitely an element of the restrictions.
Okay, thank you for that, Alex. That's really good feedback. And again, I'll ask the same question to Mike Galvin, which is, with the decline in transport requirements over the past year, what additional challenges lie ahead for becoming a carbon-free industry? Michael.
Yeah, well, I think that the most obvious impact of the last year has really been the amount of money that's drained out of the industry. You know, pretty much every business has been badly affected. Certainly, every driver has been affected. So there's less money to go around, and when you start talking about vehicle upgrades and all the rest of it, it's tough to find that money. I think that you know, the good thing with this is that clean air will help the drivers. You know, they're probably the worst affected people. They're driving around for 8, 10, 12 hours a day in all this smog. But I think that what we are going to see is cost increase, and I don't just mean financial cost, although I think there's going to be an impact from that. The tax is a big gaping hole, I think. You know, the revenue for HMRC used to come from the pump. Once we move on to electric, yeah, there's VAT involved, I guess. But road tax is dropped for clean vehicles, so that's going to have that's going to have an impact on the government. So tax has got to come from somewhere. Will that move us into road pricing? I mean, we've seen colossal changes over the last year in lots of things that we couldn't dream of doing before, like shutting pubs. So suddenly road pricing might not seem a big issue. And I think perhaps the final point for this question is that I think one of the costs is going to be, to an extent, convenience. Obviously, dispatch companies have got to catch up, and allocation will have to be matched in some way between how much charge the driver's got in his battery and how long the journey is and that type of thing, as well as who's the closest. But I think that there's you know, a range of impacts that we've yet to go through, but convenience to me will be the big one, because if it's a long journey, unless battery life suddenly leaps forward, there's going to be you know, points on the journey where the driver's going to have to pull over to charge the vehicle. So people are going to have to get used to a slightly different way of working, and probably a slightly different way of the service being delivered.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And again, you know, things such as range anxiety and all these things that I'd never heard of before being introduced. So no, I think yeah, Michael, good points there. Alex, I'm going to put this question to you. Are there any key trends that we can take from our European partners that we could implement here in the UK to become a greener industry?
It's a good question and an interesting one. I mean, clearly there are learnings always. So we learn every day about the transition to e-mobility. There is no book in the library here. So it's about us being smart about it and quick thinking. I think to a degree, the UK is in parallel to the development and rollout of EVs. So I think we're on par broadly with a lot of our European colleagues, but that's to say Holland is probably in front of most people, Germany and Norway are others, but I think at the end of the day, we also have different cultures. So there is some sensitivities around where we could learn and what we could learn. I think things like car sharing and the transition to supporting private hire, hackney carriage, all that general freedom of support and promotion of the transition from a financial perspective, which was mentioned earlier, is absolutely key. I mean, the governments need to lead from the front and focus on, you know, be it the commercial market as well as the taxi market. And to us, the taxis have been a very big leader in the transition. They are the first fleets to transition to using charge points more than any other fleet, and it's a good learning curve. But they still cry out for more support. I mean, the COVID has really hit the taxi business hard, as we're all aware, and we can see that in our data. So how do we support these guys? They've made the jump to invest in these vehicles, and yet they're now working, you know, some numbers are quoted as 90% less during the COVID lockdown. That is obviously an unsustainable area. So I'd be reaching out, and the government in Germany and Norway are giving very significant incentives. And although there are some incentives in the UK, they're not always easiest to claim. So, yeah, simplistic, well communicated ways to help fund this transition is key.
Okay, thank you for that, Alex. Really good feedback again. So I'll put the final question in topic 1 to Johnny Goldstone. How can we implement green transport across the UK to become a leader in sustainable transport?
Thanks, James. I think start by saying what do we actually mean by green transport, which for me is 3 things. Is transport necessary in the first place? Obviously, Zoom and the fact that we're all managing today without going anywhere suggests what we already know, that often it is not necessary to move anywhere. And then when it is necessary, making the emissions as low as possible and making the transport as efficient as possible. And those are 2 separate things. So low emissions using the lowest emission vehicles, and efficiency obviously optimizing the fleet that is covering that transport requirement. So journeys that are unnecessary clearly don't help the taxi or private hire industry, but they certainly do help the planet if we avoid those. But in terms of low emission and efficient transport, those are both exactly where taxi and private hire come into play. How do we implement this? I'm afraid there's some pretty big answers. One is changing our mindset. You were talking with Alex about lessons from Europe. The cyclist mindset, the pedestrian mindset ahead of the motorist mindset is something that is needed generally for the UK to become a leader in sustainable transport. Infrastructure, so the 3 I's of sustainable transport for me are infrastructure, infrastructure, and infrastructure. There isn't enough, and you need to overcommit. Government needs to overcommit on providing the infrastructure before it can expect everyone to buy the cars that are going to drive around that need that infrastructure. And also, I think we have to accept some reduced dependence on the motor car. Whether that's alternate days that certain cars can't come into city centres or whatever it may be. If we are genuine about being sustainable, then we have to be prepared to give up something in order to achieve that. So clearly, the 10-point plan that's come out of Downing Street is a very good indicator of the direction of travel. But there is now a huge amount that needs to be done to back up the nice sounding words.
Okay, thank you for that, Johnny. That's really, again, great answer to the question. So look, the feedback we had to those 4 questions will round off the topic on green and carbon neutral and what this means for the transportation sector. Again, we have recorded this, so we will send this out to all attendees so you can get more information on that and look through it again. So topic 2 is post-COVID work travel. And again, we have 3 questions based around this topic and then a case study at the end from CMAC. So we'll start with the first question on post-COVID work travel. And this will be to Keith and Johnny. So what are your predictions for the future of business travel, and will it ever fully recover? And Keith, can I ask you to answer first, please?
Yeah, I mean,
all my answers, Keith.
No, I'll try not to. I'm sure I won't. From our point of view, we're obviously not heavily reliant on the business travel customer per se. That said, we did see the off the cliff downturn in job numbers like everybody else, and our airport transfer side is more based on leisure than business. So but we obviously do have business clients, and we've had lots of conversations with them how we can be more efficient in servicing their demand. And there's been lots of talk about, do we really need these big offices in the city when people have now got used to working from home? Do we really need to fly to New York to have a business meeting that takes 3 or 4 or 5 days when they could just log on to Zoom or Teams and get the meeting out of the way and still carry on with their day? So it depends on how people have taken on board that change and got used to it and become more comfortable. You know, I very rarely had Zoom meetings before COVID, and I seem to have 4 or 5 a week now, and try and stay awake for most of them. But with that, it's will it ever recover is the question. I think it will recover. People will start to move around again, but I don't see it ever reaching the levels that it was before. And probably for all the right reasons. You know, this has added a level of efficiency and time saving. Obviously, the cost to businesses in terms of expense accounts and stuff like that has come into play as well. So yes, I think business travel will return, but I don't think we'll see it at the same levels as we have done previously.
Johnny, same question to you. What are your predictions for the future of business travel, and will it ever fully recover?
So I guess coming at this from slightly the opposite end of the spectrum to Keith, I mean, 97% of our work is corporate, but that's corporate sort of stretching from FTSE 100 to NHS and sort of everything in between. So business air travel, I don't think that will ever recover to anything like the levels it was. I think this has been a necessary, especially from an environmental point of view, shock to the system. And I think we will go back to something like before the no frills flights, where people fly because they really need to and they're prepared to pay significant sums to do so. So I don't think people will be hopping on a plane in Amsterdam over to City Airport for a 3-hour meeting. They'll just be doing that on Zoom. I think there'll be a lot of the related travel, the business meetings, lunches, and all of that stuff that will correspondingly reduce, albeit not as much as the actual to and from the airport work. On the flip side, I think whilst people thought that remote working was the best thing since sitting in a shoebox at the start of lockdown, I think a lot of people have got relatively jaded with that, and also realised that you cannot replace the benefit and dynamic of being in an office with other people. So I don't buy the idea that nobody's ever going to go back to work in an office again. Although question mark with the big city centres, how slow that return will be and how complete it will ever be. And actually my biggest concern from an environmental perspective, which on the flip side could be good for businesses like all of ours, is the concern that people will have about using public transport. I think there will be some material degree of rejection of public transport that will have been exacerbated by COVID, that was already there, especially in London and other cities, based on price and quality of public transport, that will now just increase because people will feel that their health is at risk. Now, that's not going to be everyone, and a lot of people aren't going to have the option, but I think a significant number of people who were previously getting the tube or the train or the bus will in future be taking private hire and taxi journeys. And that might not be 2 journeys every day to and from work, but if 20% of people are taking 1 journey a week, who were previously taking no journeys a week by taxi or private hire, then that's a lot of additional work for we operators. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. And I absolutely agree with Keith that the changes are generally for the right reasons. But I think it is going to be a very different landscape from here on.
Thank you, Johnny. That's great. Thank you. Right. So second question within the post-COVID work travel. And Michael, this will be for you to answer. How can we assess our business continuity plans to be more prepared for a future crisis?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I'd written a business continuity plan for somebody, and when COVID first struck, I thought I'd better have a look, and we covered pandemics, and I had, but I'd kind of sat on the fence because I said follow government advice. Well, I suspect these types of things don't come in ones. They're a bit like buses, I think. I could imagine that there'll be 2 or 3 more shocks to the system over the coming years, whether they're pandemics or something else, I don't know. But I mean, I think the thing is with, you know, any business continuity plan, you have to, you know, plan for everything possible, and, you know, build your systems so that they're resilient, build your cash flow, your staffing levels and everything else, so they're just resilient. I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer. No doubt the contingency plan writers of the world will spend the next 10 years updating everybody's contingency plan with loads of stuff about pandemics. But, you know, it was only a year ago Brexit was going to wreck the country. We've not quite got there yet. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with that. I think the move to you know, electric vehicles, I mean, it's starting to get some teeth in London now, and certainly over the next couple of years, it will get sharper teeth. If that's definitely going to have an impact on drivers, on fleets, on everybody else. You know, I mentioned before, dispatch companies need to change the way they do things. And I think probably, you know, looking for the next 5 years, 10 years, we're going to have to be pretty agile. Our planning needs to be pretty regular. It needs to be pretty agile, because there's going to be lots of changes. And I wholeheartedly agree with Johnny that, you know, how people consume transport is going to change as well. You know, are they going to be so prepared to take public transport? I mean, I went to forums a year ago where we were talking about whatever we're going to do with the railways. You know, there was talk about you can't raise all the bridges to have double-decker trains, but maybe you could sink the rails, all that kind of thing. I don't think that's going to be a big problem for some time. And there's going to be lots of those things that are not such a big problem. I mean, Crossrail was going to provide an extra 40% of capacity in London. I don't know what we're going to do with it. So I'd say, you know, planning is really important, despite, you know, being in a very volatile environment. And I think the volatility is likely to increase over the next 5 years or so. So we just need to put on our seatbelts, put on our crash helmets, and be ready for it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the feedback on that. Yeah, okay. So last but one question on post-COVID work travel. So this is to Simon Curtis. Do you think virtual meetings have replaced the need for business travel?
Hi, James. Excuse me. Yeah, I won't labour this point because I think that Keith and Johnny covered a lot of it in the previous question. But my opinion is, to that specific question, is no, but it has reduced it significantly. Statistically, the experts are talking about an 18 to 36% reduction in business travel based on tech. We're on Zoom today, which is a point that was made before. I think that it will facilitate working from home. I think it will facilitate initial calls, and it will replace, you know, it will reduce the need or the desire for the big long distance trips, something that I used to do. But, you know, I deal in marketing, which is a little different to what you guys do. And I think it's important to remember emotion and human science, and ultimately don't underestimate the power of human interaction and its draw. And I think it's also worth remembering there's lots of different types of meetings. We do a lot of transactional stuff. You know, collaboration is something that just can't be done over video call as much as we'd like to. So I think that's my answer to that, James.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Really good feedback again. And then finally, Peter Slater from CMAC is just going to go through an example of how they have helped suppliers return to work. So Pete, I'll just hand over to you.
I don't want to build anyone's hopes up, but I won't necessarily call it a case study as to what I want to talk about. It's actually the other way around. I want to make the point is that it's how suppliers have helped us help clients get back to work. So for those of you that don't know, we do quite a lot of work in the rail industry, and it's usually moving train operating crew from depots to stations, etc. So there's a lot of sort of relatively short distance journeys, but there's a lot of them, and they're spread throughout the UK. So when the pandemic first happened and we encountered full lockdown, so initially we were extremely busy working with our train operating company clients to make lots of cancellations and reductions because of obviously the reduced amount of trains that were being planned on running, albeit they were still having to run a skeleton train network. And obviously the challenge for us at that point was dealing with a heavily unionised industry who were clambering at all sorts of things at the time, which is still, I'm not going down the road of arguing whether screens make a difference or whether they don't, whether they're safer or not in vehicles, because I don't even want to start that. But you can imagine trying to deal with unions who have a view that black cabs were safer than saloon cars, and we have to have all our train crew moved in black cabs now, which is quite an easy sentence to say. But obviously that involved us working with our existing supply chain, who possibly don't have those vehicles in the fleet, etc., etc. And I just wanted to touch on how well the supply industry, the taxi private hire industry, responded and worked with us on that to put screens in. Again, debatable whether we all believe whether they're better or not. Drivers with the standards of cleaning and keeping up to all that sort of process, and albeit a very difficult period for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the initial lockdown. The suppliers who responded to that all throughout the country to make that still a reality were incredible, and we're only just about starting to get back to putting the same amounts of work through those suppliers with the right vehicles that were originally doing it, and then obviously we unfortunately have the same issues come back around again. So we're still working through that with all the suppliers, but I just wanted to highlight how difficult that's been. Especially, but it's not us that's needing to provide the vehicles. So we've had to work with the suppliers and make sure that they get, a voice, a union telling a train operating company that only their drivers or their train staff will get in a black cab. Just wasn't fair, and we had to sort of fight that sort of corner really, and because it was a very sweeping statement that needed to be dealt with, and the response from everybody was very good, and I hope that shows the kind of working together. We're not here just to distribute work. We're here to support the industry and get people's voices heard, which is what I meant about sort of the transition to green vehicles and all that sort of stuff. It's not as easy as it first appears potentially, but so that's all I wanted to touch on. So it's not really a case study. It's more of just a bit of anecdote about the challenges.
No, thanks, Pete. That's brilliant. Okay, so that's going to wrap up topic 2, which then just takes us on to the final topic, which is topic 3. And then I think we should have some time to answer a few questions which have come through. So topic 3 is the marketing implications around green, carbon neutral and post-COVID work travel. So first question in this topic is, how can green transportation be used for community integration and awareness strategy? And the first question I'll ask to that, and the first person I'll put that to, is Alex Bamberg, please.
Yes, hi, James, again. Well, I think, it's a very broad question, actually, but there's clearly a whole swathe of opportunities here, right from two-wheelers to four-wheelers, bicycle or otherwise, and obviously across the globe you're seeing massive increases in the bicycle and indeed the powered bicycle. That's one of the big growth areas as well, and how the urban areas, particularly London, are being slightly reformed to allow some protection and encourage that usage, and where you get this cross mutual benefit of health and fitness and things like that which tie in. And I think COVID again has driven that awareness massively, and which is again it's seeing a huge upsurge. As regards the sort of four-wheel side of things, clearly again there's so many quality items that wrap around a pure EV, whether it's silence, night delivery, clean local emissions, etc., etc. And I think all these things do need to be put across and educated. That allows us to make better decisions going forwards about our personal and commercial transport needs. So how do we do that? I think it's ongoing education. I think the vehicles talk for themselves largely. I mean, the growth in EVs for these new range of vehicles, which have, the effect of 100, 200, 250, 300 miles, are all beginning to speak for themselves in many ways. But, and you can cross-reference that into, again, the car clubs transport elements, autonomous vehicles. The whole piece is a fascinating segment. The price point, which was mentioned earlier, is a very interesting area where the electric vehicles, provided they're funded correctly, offer obviously a monstrous reduction in operational cost. It's the capital cost of these vehicles that cause the problem. And that's where, again, this government element needs to be brought to power, and to be able to lobby government in this way with some, we've now got some real evidence to say how the lower maintenance, the fuel savings, and the air quality benefits are real. How do we promote that is the key piece. But I think some of the promotion is almost, you can see it on the road, it helps itself. But local authorities, boroughs of London particularly, need to promote it. They're not all leading from the front. They should be releasing and supporting better planning permissions for, is it street furniture, is it car parking areas? There's a lot of bottlenecks around that delivery and how we promote that. So it's a general question, to be fair, and it's a good debate.
Okay, thanks, Alex. That's great. And Simon, can I ask you the same question? How can green transportation be used for community integration and awareness strategy?
You can, James. I think marketing is about influencing someone's decision at the end of the day, and I'm a big believer in keeping things simple. So green transportation services will appeal to those who care about the environment, especially, and talking about private hire, actually, something that can often be a challenge, certainly with rideshare app technology as a competitor, but it's targeting that woke millennial and Gen Z crowd, and actually, presenting what you're offering is, again, just keeping it simple. The consumers don't really care about all the tech, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. They don't. Keep it simple. Target them. There's various digital strategies that can target them, and position it as a positive choice that they're making and that you're offering for your community. Basically, it is that simple, to be honest.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Si. Again, thank you for the feedback. So, second question in this topic is, and this is going to be for you, Peter. How can green transformation be used to help with business travel and account work acquisition?
Yeah. So for us on this, I think Mike's already touched on something. It's for me, it's definitely our collaboration with dispatch providers has got to give us a differential, an easy one that's genuine. That if clients do want to choose based on the emissions of a vehicle or any other factor that's to do with green factors, we need to be able to differentiate those on the choice that we present to our clients. We don't particularly do too much on-demand work anyway, so we would need some to work with the industry and provide that sort of choice. It's quite difficult at the moment unless we go to just give all our work to Green Tomato Cars, because we know all of the cars are the same. But that's sort of where we're at. We've got to be really careful that where we sit is that we are not here to dictate to any supplier what fleet they choose to run. And we have to be careful with that, especially on the emergency side of things that we do, because we have to provide X number of vehicles in X amount of time. So, and we know the challenges with that we've discussed already on this call about potential bottlenecks in, even if suppliers want to purchase vehicles, there's possibly not enough of them at the moment. How long are they going to be, etc., etc. So for us, it's quite a challenge at the moment, but we're going to work with suppliers on and clients on that choice. But it's just a real choice as well, as opposed to, some of the dispatch systems at the moment will show us that a Prius is available, but that Prius may well be 10 or 15 years old and therefore no more efficient or more greener than a newer diesel vehicle, or petrol vehicle. So we've just got to be careful with it, because we sit in the middle. We don't have the challenge of buying these vehicles, so we don't want to come across as you should be doing this and you should be doing that, because that's not our place. We're just here to try and help the supply chain get, and the consumer will make the choice. That's if the drive is that business travellers want to choose to go in an electric vehicle, and therefore they may want to, they're quite happy to wait an extra 10 or 15 minutes if there's not one available. That is where we sit, but we also want to make sure that, you know, we're not dictating to anyone what kind of vehicles they should be working with.
No, it's a good point, and I think choice, you know, again, you know, for the younger generations now are probably prepared to sometimes wait 10 minutes for an electric vehicle, you know, just to be more carbon friendly, carbon neutral, you know, is a big thing on everyone's lips at this moment in time. So no, I think that's good answer to that, Peter. Thank you. And then third question in this topic is to Keith and Johnny. And Keith, obviously, if you can go first. So during COVID, what corporate and account work is available, and how have you obtained it?
It's been obviously a really strange time, and new account customers or new business was slow to come on board. We had lots of inquiries about, you know, different ways of deliveries and things like that. But generally speaking, because of the challenging times, it wasn't the right time to go out with the hard sell tactic to anybody. You know, people were fear of their jobs, their livelihood. You know, selling wasn't on our agenda at all. It was just making people aware that we were very fortunate. We were able to keep our lights on, stay in business, and let everybody know that we were open and ready to go as and when we were needed. We saw some changes in usage from our customers. For the first 2 weeks, it seemed that we'd become the biggest laptop delivery service in London. If it wasn't laptops, it was whole computer systems we were being asked to get around so that people could work from home. Very fortunate with a couple of our account customers in the medical sector and things that people need to be moved around, you know, pretty much 24 hours a day. So the number of jobs dropped, but the distance travelled and the value of those jobs increased. So the drivers were kept fairly busy in a good way. So we didn't really take new business on board in a big scale. We just saw our relationships change with our customers. It became a lot more personal. There was a lot more contact. We even started having Zoom meetings with those as well to try and make their travel needs and delivery needs more efficient, without actually costing them more money as a result of that. So the bond between the client and us in many respects has become more solid. It's been a strange experience for all of us with this screen time, face-to-face meetings that we've been having, and it's worked out pretty well. Our local authority contracts really come into play, and we went from home to school, special needs transport, to food bank hub dispatching around to their distribution hub network. That was really busy for a few weeks. And we've seen, you know, to use a salesy thing, as some vertical markets come out of what we do that will be completely new for us going forward. Yeah. I don't think it's been all doom and gloom from looking at the future. I think we've got some really exciting opportunities that are coming to us as an industry, not just to us as an individual company. We've seen collaboration with different companies. We've got quite a good network that works well, and it's all linked. So we've been sharing account work, and it made it more efficient, which has been really good. So one key thing was we really do need to work together and collaborate in a much more efficient way, and that's all doable now. So the other thing that we noticed was our drivers, and you know, how to appreciate the staff and the team that work in the support side of things within the office or working from home, as we were set up for home working about 2.5 weeks before lockdown, because we could see what was going on, and Val Communications and our suppliers helped us get that going. Our team have really stepped up and delivered a shift throughout. It's been amazing, a really humbling experience for me. And the same with the drivers. They're on the front line, you know, and obviously they were as scared as anybody. One driver was talking about screens funny, what you mentioned, Peter, and he just felt that it was a mobile Petri dish and had become a COVID catcher. So didn't really want to go up that road and set up a WhatsApp group advising drivers not to put screens up in the car, just to be really conscious of cleaning the vehicle down as much as possible and taking all of the government advice in terms of the cleanliness approach. So I've gone off on a tangent a little bit. So what new account work was available? Not a huge amount. How did you obtain? Was there a different type of account work available? Absolutely. And we've just been really pleased to be able to deliver throughout this crisis, and we're just looking forward to next year and hopefully getting back to some sort of normality for everybody.
Thanks, Keith. Really appreciate that. Brilliant. And Johnny, same question to you. During COVID, what corporate and account work is available, and how did you obtain it?
Yeah, so similar in some respects to what Keith's saying, we also do quite a lot of NHS work. Where some of our big corporates dropped off a cliff, others replaced quite a lot of that missing work, whether that was operational businesses that have to have people there on site, and those people would traditionally have travelled on public transport or however. Suddenly we'd be doing all of those journeys to and from work every day. So we've seen a massive shift in which businesses are spending and how much they're spending and what the journey profiles are. Our average fares have actually been quite consistent with pre-COVID, but our peaks have changed a little bit. It's a lot less morning rush hour and end of the afternoon rush hour. There's sort of a more even spread through the day. We work with a lot of broadcasters, so that's been a good portfolio to have, as well as the NHS. In terms of people who've got to keep going. And actually, in terms of sort of green shoots of recovery, we also do a lot of production work. And I'm sure that it's not just the production sector, but there are industries and sectors that, they were essentially furloughed and working from home for months and months at the beginning of lockdown. And they've got to get back to work. They can't just not be producing and creating for 9-10 months. So slowly but surely it has been coming back online. Some of those accounts that did stop almost altogether have started picking up, and in some cases really with quite some energy and enthusiasm to get on with the stuff that they hadn't been doing for the previous month. So we are seeing a swing back to being busy. We have won some new work, which has been great. Especially from word of mouth. I think whilst we'd all rather be busier, one of the benefits of being less busy is that your performance should improve. And our Net Promoter Score over the last 3 months has been about 84, which from what we can tell is about the highest Net Promoter Score for any business in the world, but certainly way ahead in terms of the logistics industry. So a lot of word of mouth, a lot of positivity from drivers and customers. And I do think the kind of Dunkirk spirit that was certainly there for the first few weeks and months and has probably waned a little now. People are saying, oh, you can't use COVID as an excuse and you can't use pandemic as an excuse for not answering the phone quickly and all of that sort of thing. I do think the more reasonable people who understand that this is a completely unparalleled situation, I think that sort of helps us all and raises us all in terms of understanding each other, having patience and tolerance for each other, which, as we all know in the service industry, sometimes that can be in short supply. So I would like to think that by working better and by having more understanding stakeholders, in some respects, it's, there have certainly been silver linings.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you. That's really good. Thank you very much. Okay, so final question within this topic is going to be for you, Simon, which is, with the current reduction in business travel, what marketing and comm strategy should you be implementing now and after the pandemic?
Okay, well, I could spend about 45 minutes talking about this, so I'll try and keep it.
You've got
I'll try and keep it as there's two parts to this. There's now and then the future. And look, everybody's makeup of their business between retail and corporate is different. So I'm probably going to talk more, because we've been talking about business travel. I'm going to talk more to customers that have a lot of business work. So, the key at this point is to push the COVID safety, screen or no screen. I leave that to your individual decision making, but there's obviously a lot of other aspects, from HEPA filters through to just drivers wearing masks. So it's about emotion. Safety is an emotion. Make it your customers feel safe. So push that through great content and communicate that message out there. Then we found a lot of our customers have pivoted, whether they've or diversified into could be delivery or it could be, you know, corporates focusing on retail, you know, for example, retail work instead. So, but ultimately, it's just about pushing that message out there and targeting those individuals, and you're more likely to pick up work right now. And then in terms of afterwards, and we get through this, and obviously, you know, just looking at the effect on the stock market every time something's announced about the vaccine, it's really interesting because you know, say EasyJet's share prices went up and Zoom's went down, literally just like that. It was fascinating to watch. But the advice that we've been giving to everybody is, and this is specifically for regarding the lack of corporate travel, is don't go dark on that. Keep pushing your core messaging. Really, that's crucial, and keep in touch with your customers. It's almost been a great reset, and there's the obvious. You know, I think we have to talk real talk. You know, there are businesses that haven't made it through this, and there's also there's been people have had a lot of time to potentially look at who they're, you know, they may shop around. So actually, it's a perfect opportunity by pushing those core products out there. You may pick up new business, but you also need to bubble wrap your existing customers and don't forget about them. And then when it comes, you know, when it comes back, so keep talking about it now. It's my advice. Keep pushing it. But then when it comes back, do make a real song and dance out of being excited. You're genuinely excited. Everyone I speak to is so excited to get their customers back. They're missing it. Go and see people that they've not seen. You know, people buy from people. Be genuine about that. Show that you are excited. That will resonate. And then just keep pushing your core product. Is my advice there. So it has been a tough time, but you know, we're nearly through it now. So.
All right, thanks, Si. That's great. So look, as we promised, we were going to keep this under an hour, and we've managed. So we've covered all three topics, and I hope you all felt the benefit of some of the feedback and that came from the panel. We have got some questions, which I'm probably going to just put a few of the panel on the spot to answer. Again, we will get more in-depth answers to some of the questions that we've had come in. So Fiona has sent me through a few questions, which I will just direct at a few of the panel. So I've got the first question. So there's a little bit of a statement and then a question at the end of it. So this is from Alex Bolt, and it is the private hire industry ready for the 2030 deadline for no new petrol diesel cars vehicles in terms of the infrastructure for drivers to fast charge vehicles, and how many hours can we expect private hire drivers to complete for a full day's work without huge delays? Furthermore, who foots the bill? Even if drivers have employee rights, surely prices are going to be hiked in the industry for businesses and consumers alike. So then the question behind all that is, when can we realistically expect London and indeed the rest of the UK to be fully electric? And I think, Alex, you might be best placed to give some feedback on that.
Sorry, I had a bit of internet.
No, it's fine.
Googling going on. Can you just repeat the last half of the question?
So basically the question is when can we realistically expect London and indeed the rest of the UK to be fully electric?
Well, there's not going to be an overnight switch. Clearly, that's not going to happen. I think what we're seeing is a massive acceleration of transition, and it slightly would depend on the cost initiatives, which we've touched on constantly. So, because nobody's going to do this, there is a cost to this transition. So, I think what will happen early on, so certainly late, 2027 onwards, you'll see such massive residual negatives on diesel vehicles, particularly, that I think that will be a very big point of where those fleet vehicles that are on a cycle of 3-5 years will definitely be turning their thoughts to this, and that you're not going to see 100% clean switch. I mean, it's just not possible. So it's not a question I would like to answer thoroughly in that sense, because we are driving this whole element of transition. And we talked about everything from road pricing to low emission zones to all these sorts of things. All these sorts of things are on the table, and they are all going to define how quickly that transition actually is going to happen. So 2030 is a great deadline to have, but in my view, that transitioning was already beginning to happen, that the market is seeing drop in residual values of internal combustion engines, and some of them are very significant. And you're also seeing a rise in residual and the strengthening of residual values in EVs. And actually, you've got diesels coming down 30 or 40% in some segments, and increases of 30 or 40% on the EVs. So you've got a natural transition. So whether that becomes to really a massive mass market transition around 2025 is a big debate, and it will flow from there. So not an exact answer to your question, but it sort of helps.
Just a point for me. So is 2030 achievable, or is it just a point in time to review?
I think it's a point in time to review, but everybody will target it because I think the market will dictate, basically down to commercial residual values and legislation put on the OEMs and low emission zones. So I think it will happen. That there is no doubt. And you already see the massive spends going on across the OEM business of, now to hear 22, 23, 30 billion euros or dollars put into the transitioning of fleets, of vehicles, should I say, from these auto OEMs is now not commonplace, but it's almost a monthly occurrence. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, that would have been unheard of. So how long do those vehicles take to get in the showroom, get on the street? That typical journey is anywhere between 5 and 8 years. So is it in scope? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Alex, I have got another question for you, which I think you're well placed to give your feedback on as well. Sorry to keep, and this is from David Pryor. Is EV just a stopgap until hydrogen technology develops sufficiently? Yeah,
that's a good question. I mean, at the moment, the gain of hydrogen is not there as we sit here today, because of the cost of reforming the gas costs more in damage to the environment than it does running a car on renewables. Actually, a car on even brown energy is more efficient. So that's a big debate. Is there a future in this? Absolutely. There's an increased interest in the hydrogen option. It does overnight come with bigger range, probably slightly quicker fill times. But again, you're weighing that up against the massive strides in battery production and the ability of the battery that's sort of halved in price over the last 5 years. It will continue to drop to a point, but the efficiencies are there. So now if you can buy a car for 30 or 40,000 pounds, yes, it's expensive, but that car will be able to do 250, 350 miles. Is there a need for a highly inflammable gas in the back of your car? It's a basic question. So at the end of the day, is there another application for more HGVs, e-bus type scenarios? The answer is most definitely. Are they already around? Yes, they are. Is hydrogen a better alternative to things like CNG or LPG? Yes, definitely. But at the end of the day, probably the most beneficial fuel at the moment is LNG for heavy use. But I think hydrogen will be the future once there's a mass production of renewable energy that can reform it, and where you see a real benefit on air quality, and the supply chain is there to back that up. So long answer, it's a big debate. It's a good debate. But don't forget, essentially a hydrogen vehicle is an electric platform with an onboard clean generator on it. Yes, you can burn hydrogen in an internal combustion engine. We know that, but that's not a very efficient way of doing it. So per kilometre, a hydrogen electric vehicle is a very efficient solution, but that's probably 5 years away from any sort of niche or mass market applications.
Thank you, Alex. That was a really good answer. Appreciate that. Again, I have another question from Alan from the Private Hire News. Michael, I'm probably going to put this one to you because I know you've done a bit on it. How long do you think it will be until we see the first driverless cars in the UK and the PHV sector?
Uh,
I know you got that one.
I suspect it will be quite a while. And I think that the reason I say that is there's obviously problems with 5G. There's no business case for it at the moment, and that's a serious issue. The second thing is I think that probably COVID has put everything back everywhere, and I think that we've yet to really start to think about the real issues of swap over from, manual cars, if I can call them that, to autonomous cars. And I think any kind of transition period where we've got a mixed fleet will be something a bit like hell on earth, because the odd autonomous vehicle initially, with the majority being manually driven, through to 50-50, through to 80-20, through to no more manual vehicles, is going to be a pretty difficult period to cope with. And I know there's always these conversations about, Uber peaked too early. They should have really waited until we had an autonomous cars and have cleaned up. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that autonomous cars commoditize what's actually available in the market. So I think if you take people, well, just the two operators we've got here, really, you take Keith and you take Johnny, both great businesses, but poles apart, completely poles apart, different customers, different business profiles, different levels of drivers, cars, everything else involved. And I think that customers ultimately like choice. And when it comes down to just, anonymous, autonomous pods rattling around, it's a very different service. And some of the reasons that you take a taxi or take a chauffeur car or take a private hire vehicle or whatever, there will be numerous reasons why you take them. Getting from A to Z is one of them, but there's other reasons as well. You can spoil yourself for £10. You can have a chat with the driver. You can make a call that you can't do on the underground. There's a whole range of reasons why you would take one of those vehicles. And I think that when you try to commoditize that and homogenize it, you end up with a very different product. So I think it's going to be quite some time. If you were asking me for a date, I'd be talking 10, 15, perhaps even 20 years away, in a serious way. I mean, I think there's good opportunity for things like big car parks at airports. Instead of having these shuttle buses running around, autonomous pods make a lot more sense. But I think, mainstream on the road, people wanting to hire one to go from A to Z, 10, 15, perhaps 20 years away.
Okay, Mike, thank you for that. Again, I knew you'd give me a good answer to that one. So, there's one other question, Isabel. Yes, we will be sharing the video once we've just, and we'll send that out to everybody that's registered. So, look, I've kept it under an hour. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists. Really good feedback. Really enjoyed it, and I think the topics have been great. And yeah, so look, I just thank you to all the attendees that have stayed on. We've kept all the numbers up, so that's fantastic. And as I say, we will share the video. We'll give you a bit more in-depth answers on the questions, and I'll ask the panel. I'll email the panel to give you some more feedback on those. But again, thank you for attending. Thank you, panel. And that's it. That's the end of the webinar. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.